Hello everyone and welcome to part 1 of our inventory system series. In this series, we will be creating a fully working functional inventory where we can pick up multiple items and use them, and also swap between the items, the slots, swap between slots, and drop. And we can also split the item that we have. So that we have 6 apples, we can split them inside the word, and we have 3 in our inventory. We can also drop any amount we want. So let's say I want to drop 2, we drop 2, and we are left with 1. And we can also use the items. So right now my shield is 50. If I double click here, it will go to 80, and we remove one item that from the inventory because we used it. And also for the health potion it works, so 100, and we remove this potion from our inventory. Okay, so let's get started. First we need to create some data. So data includes enums and structs. So let's go ahead and start with the enum. So go ahead and search for blueprint enumeration, and let's call it e underscore inventory item rarity, and open that up and add few enums. First one is common, the second one is uncommon, then we have rare, epic, and legendary. Let's close that up and let's go create some structs now. First one we need is s underscore item data, or let's inventory item data. Open that up, and we need here the rarity we just created. Okay, so rarity. We also need name for it, so name. We also need max stacks. Max stack. This is responsible to determine how many items can stack on top of each other in the same inventory slot. Then we need an image, item image, so texture 2D. We also need a description. And finally, we need a variable that holds the class of the item. So let's call this class. And right now we don't have the class yet, so let's create it very quickly. Let's go to interactables, and if you followed my blueprint tutorial about interactables, you will have this interactables base that we will extend from, and let's call it inventory item base. Now, if you don't have this class, this interactables base, I recommend that you watch the tutorial that I did about interactables, because most of this video tutorial will be based on this interactable, because we need to interact with the inventory item in order to pick it up. And that's exactly what this interactables base does. So that's why we inherited from it. Okay. Now let's go back here and search for inventory item base and class reference. Let's close this. Now let's create another struct. Let's call it s underscore inventory slot. Okay, and then here we need the item data we just did, item data, and we need the quantity of this item. How many we have in our inventory of this item. Okay, now let's create a component for the inventory. So blueprint class actor component, bp underscore inventory component. Let's open that up, and in here first we need to create a variable that holds that keeps the data of the items that we already have in our inventory. So let's create it. Let's call it slot, and it's of type inventory slot structure, struct, and it's an array. Okay, and what else do we need? Yeah, we need a capacity of type integer and a single variable, and that's responsible for how big our inventory is. So let's by default give it a default value of 20. It can hold up to 20 items. And let's give this parameters category, and this let's make it, give it private category and make it private. Now we need to create, but first let's go to class defaults and disable the tick enable so we can have better performance. Okay. Now let's go and create two functions. First one is stack item, and it takes two parameters. It takes the data, so item data, okay, of the item we want to stack, so item data, and the second one is an integer quantity to stack. Okay, and for these inputs, the item data is passed by reference and is constant, and for the quantity to stack, we need to also pass it by reference. And at this parameter, it takes a parameter, a boolean, and let's call it full stack. or let's call it stacked, fully stacked. Okay, so if true, it means that all the quantity we want to stack here was stacked on top of another item. Okay, if not, if let's say maximum stack of an item is 5 and we want to stack 6 items, so that means we are left with one item, right? This will return false. We didn't fully stack all of the items. And the second function we want to create is find empty slot. This will find an empty slot inside the array, and it returns an integer slot index. And these two functions are private. Let's make them private, give them category of private. And this find empty slot is a constant and pure function. Now let's close this and go into our stack item. Okay, and first we need to get the slots we already have, the inventory slots, and we do a for loop. Okay, and let's promote this array index to a local variable called element index. And let's promote this also a variable. Let's call it slot. Okay. Now for each, we need to make a for loop like we did, and we need to check for each item we have. We need to check if it's the same item we are adding. If so, we want to try and stack it on top of this already existing item. Okay, so now let's check if it's the same item. So we do this by breaking this, or let's just split it here and break this, hide unconnected pins, and unhide the class. And we want to check if it's equal to the item data here. So let's get the item data. This is the same as this, the parameter, and let's break it. And let's make sure it's equal. Let's make sure the item that we're adding is equal, already exists in the inventory. Okay. Now, if it already exists, if you already have one, we want to check if the quantity that we already have in our inventory allows us to stack this new item on top of it. So we do this by checking how many stacks are allowed for this item, and then we subtract from it the quantity here that we already have. So let's get this local variable slot, this one here, and let's split it. And for the slot item data, let's break it and hide unconnected pins and unhide the max stack. So max stack minus the slot quantity. Okay, and let's promote this to a local variable called space left. Then we check if it's bigger than 0. If it's bigger than 0, if you have space left, we need to check how many amount we can add. Okay, so let's say it's space left. We have 2 space left. We can add 2 to this item. We can stack 2 items to this item. Then we need to check how many amounts we can add. So let's say the quantity to stack is 5, and we only have 2 space left. So we can only stack 2, right? So we need to get the minimum value between the quantity to stack and space left. So to do that, let's get space left and get the minimum. And the second one is quantity to get to stack. So get quantity to stack. Let's promote this to a variable, to a local variable amount to add. Then we need to modify this array to add the new quantity of this item. So let's get the slot and let's set member, and let's unhide the quantity. And the new quantity is the amount we added plus the already existing quantity. So let's break this and get quantity plus the amount to add. And we need to set this change inside the array, back to the array. So set array element, and the index is the element index. Then we need to tell this function that the quantity to stack, like now we need to update the quantity to stack value because we passed it by reference, so we can update it, and it will be passed inside the next function that will call this function. Okay, so we need to update the quantity to stack to let the engine know that we already added. So let's say this is 5 here. We need to tell the engine that we already added 1 of this. So just update this to become 4. Okay, and then becomes 3, then it becomes 2, then it becomes 1, then it becomes 0, which means if it's equal to 0, that means we fully stacked this item. Okay, so now let's update this. Let's get quantity to add to stack, set pass by ref, set by ref value, by ref variable, and the value is the quantity to stack. Quantity to stack minus the amount to add. Then we need to check if this new quantity is less or equal to 0. That means we already stacked everything. We fully stacked everything. And if it's not equal to 0, don't do anything. Just keep doing this for each loop. Then when completed, we need to return quantity to stack, get quantity to stack, smaller or equal to 0, and we return this. So what happened here? Like I said, if the quantity to stack we fully stack is smaller or equal to 0, that means we fully stacked everything. We don't have any items left to put, and we stacked everything on top of each other, and we return true. When we return true, this completed function, this completed here will never be called. Okay, the function will stop executing. Okay, this will never be called. So if the function if this is never called, okay, if it always return false and the loop is over, then this will be called. Okay, and it will return if we have any more items to stack or not. If this is smaller than or equal to 0, then it will return true, we fully stack. Else, if it's not, then it's not fully stacked, and we have more items to add to the inventory in a new slot if the capacity allows to. Okay. Now for the find empty slot, let's make a for loop again and plug the slot in it, and let's split this. And we need to check if the array element quantity is less or equal to 0. That means there is no item in this slot. Then we return the array index here. And on completed, if we never return this, we need to return -1. Or let's promote this to a variable and call it null, index null, default value of -1, and that's it. Now, now we need to create a new function. Let's call it add item. Let's make it public and give it category of public. And it takes two parameters actually. First one is of type item base, the inventory item base, item to add, and the second, and the second one is quantity to add, and I want to give it a default value of 1, and a parameter, an output, sorry, of type item, of type boolean, and let's call it item added. Okay. Now first we need to check if the quantity we're adding is bigger than 0, of course, and if it's, plug this in. Now if it's smaller than 0, smaller or equal to 0, we return item added false. Then if it's not, if it's bigger than 0, we get the item to add, and we check if it's valid. If not, let's return item added false. Now if it's valid, we check if, first we need to check, we need to try to stack the item on top of another item. So item data here is the get item. First let's go to our blueprint class here, our inventory item base, and let's create a variable here. Let's call it item data of type item data, the struct. Okay. And let's close this. Let's get it here now, get item data. And the quantity to stack is get quantity. And if we fully stacked, it was fully stacked, we simply return node item added true. Now, if we didn't fully stack, that means we have quantity left that we need to add down to the inventory if we have enough capacity. Okay, so let's get the find empty slot and promote it to a local variable. Let's call it empty slot index. But first, let's make a quick check and let's get the quantity to add. If it's bigger than 0, let's make a while loop. Okay, and while it's bigger than 0, we want to do this. So while it's bigger, while we have quantity to add, let's add them. And once the quantity is smaller or equal to 0, we call this completed. And let's call it now. Let's call it with item added true. Now we need to check if this is equal to the index null. If it's equal to index null, so if it's equal to -1, that means what does it mean? It means that there was no slot with 0 quantity. That means all the slots are taken. That means the inventory is full. Okay, so let's return. First, let's make a branch. Sorry. Then, if it's equal to index null, that means inventory is full. So item added false, full inventory. Now, if it's not full, we need to get the item that we want to add. So let's get this, copy this item to add item data. Let's break it and unhide the max stack. And we need to get the minimum between the max stack and the quantity to add. Okay. So let's say the quantity to add is, for example, 5. We have 5 quantity to add, and the max stack is 3. We can only add 3, right? We can't add 5 to a max stack of 3. So we need to get the minimum between these two and promote this to a variable called amount to add. Then we need to get the slot array and get a reference and the index we want to get the reference at is equal to this empty slot index. Okay. Then we need to set member inside this array. and the amount quantity is the amount to add, and the item data is this item data here, the data of the item we are adding. Then, like we did before, so we need to reduce this quantity to add in order for this loop to execute the uncompleted. Because if we don't reduce this quantity to add, if we don't decrease it, then this will get an error, infinite loop, and the game will crash. Okay, because it's always bigger than zero. We are never setting it, we are never decreasing it to become less than zero. So this will run forever. Okay, and it will crash. So we need to pass this set by ref, and the value is this minus the amount to add. Okay, now it will automatically decrease every time, decrease by the amount we added every time we add an item. Okay, and finally it will become less or equal to zero, and the uncompleted will be called with item added to true. Now let's close this and let's go into our player character. And in here we need to add the inventory component, and they have capacity as a parameter. We can make it whatever we want. I want to keep it at 20. Great. Now let's create a subclass of our inventory item base. But first, let's go into our base class, and in the construction script, we want to get the item data. So get item data, and you want to set a member, this, and unhide this class, and the value is get class or self. First get a reference to self, then get class. Okay, and plug this in. Now it will automatically set. If you have a subclass, it will automatically set its own class inside this item data. Now the reason we need this is because we are checking here in the add item and the stack item. We are checking if this class is equal to the class we are trying to add. Also, we need it later to drag and drop items from the inventory into the word, because we need this class to spawn an actor of itself inside the word where we drop it. Okay, so let's close this and let's override this get interaction text, and this is from the interactive tutorial that I did before, and I wanted to return the name of the item. So name, and plug it here. Okay, great. And one more thing, we need to update the sender interaction. So let's get the inventory component from the character, convert to validated get, and let's add item, quantity, this item to add itself, and quantity, I wanted one only. And if we added the item successfully, then we destroy it from the word. Now let's close this and create a child blueprint class. Let's make an example of a potion. Okay. Now inside the class defaults, let's give it a rarity of uncommon, name, potion. Description, let's leave it empty for now. And image, I don't have an image for now. Max stack is, let's give it a 3. And class, we can leave it empty because it already does itself, populate itself in the construction script. Now let's go to Fab. If you don't have this button here, go to plugins, look for Fab, and enable this plugin. Now let's search for a potion, any free potion. Let's add this one. Okay, let's go to Fab, check it. Okay, it's huge, it's very big. Let's start into the word. Yeah, it's very big. Let's make it smaller. So go to selection mode, modeling. If you don't have it, also go to plugins and look for modeling tools, editor mode. Now let's go to XOR, transform, and make it smaller, 0.1. That's still too big. 0.05, 0.02. Yeah, 0.015. Click completed, and then bake transform. It will give you a warning that it will modify the static mesh. Please make copies in the content browser, but I want to modify it immediately. I don't want copies, so click accept. And the edit pivot, let's make it center, accept, and we're done. Let's delete this. Go into our potion class, interactive mesh, look for potion, and make the sphere smaller, like 50. Okay, now let's drag it here. No, not this one, let's drag the class. Like so. Now if you start the game, let's make the sphere a little bigger. Okay, and you click E, nothing works, and that's because okay, so I found the reason. The reason is because I forgot to do something inside the inventory component, and that's on begin play. We want to resize the array to be equal to the capacity. So right now, the array, when we begin play, the array will resize itself to have 20 array elements, but all of them are empty. But it will have 20 array elements. Okay, so now if you start, as you can see, the item disappeared. It was destroyed because in here, if we added the item, if it's true, we destroy it, right? So it was added. But however, we don't have any visual for the inventory. So let's go ahead and create a widget, but not now, in the next tutorial. So in the next part. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you guys found it useful, and I hope that's what you really want. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next part.